Welcome everyone to another Grip-Birkman Coaches Cafe. It's great to have you with us. We're going to have a really exciting discussion today about the idea of gift isolation and how that relates to our principle of body life, and particularly talking about the grip and how we use that. So to get right into our discussion, let me just lead us in a quick word of prayer and then we'll start right off. Lord, I want to thank you for the unique opportunity that we have to be together in real time using this technology from different places, even on different continents, different time zones. Thank you, Father, for allowing it to work, and please help it to work efficiently and effectively for us as we have our dialogue, so that not just the ones who are participating here can benefit from it, but others who are watching and listening on the recording. That, Father, it may be an opportunity for us to give some really practical tools to people that they can use to build unity in your body, because ultimately, Father, we do want to serve you and bring fruit to you and glorify you, and you've said that's the way we can do it. So bless us now, Father, in our discussion, our dialogue, and allow us to be a blessing to each other and even to others because of it. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, hey, it's good to have all of you here with us, and I do want to jump right in. I'm going to throw up just a couple of quick slides. I hope that that's going to work. If I share my screen and I show you, tell me if you can see that PowerPoint up there now. Yeah, Jay, can I see your head nodding up and down? Because, all right, good. Because good. Thank you. So as we are looking at the idea of gift isolation, before we talk about that, let's remember that our principle, our core belief, one of our core beliefs is that Christians who are good stewards lead or serve most powerfully through their spiritual gifts. That's one of the absolute basic things that we talk about, because we do use assessments, but the assessments are not primary. The primary thing is we're talking about how to help believers learn to use their gifts and their personality and their interests, their entire being, for the purpose of leading or serving in the way that God has called them to lead or serve. And we celebrate the fact that there are differences in those. And of course, one of the major differences between Grip-Birkman and other types of assessments that might be similar is that we look at it in the context of body life. That's one of the key, most important things about what we are looking at with Grip-Birkman. And so when we start talking about this idea of gift isolation that Steve Hoke has written and done a magnificent job of reminding us of this danger that we have, if we are working in gift isolation, a simple definition for that is just when a person is ministering in their gifts, but in isolation from a healthy body life community or team. That's the core idea of it, that we believe that it is important for us to be looking at our gifts in the context of body life. But if I am ministering from my gifts, using the gifts that God has given me, but I am not doing that in the context of healthy body life, be that in my church community, a team, even in my work setting, my family life even, if I'm not using that gift in the context of healthy body life, community, team, then I'm using that gift in isolation from others, and I'm not getting all of the benefit from that gift, and I'm not doing it perhaps in the most beneficial way for the reason that it was given to me. So there's no opportunity, as Steve said, for other people with other complementary gifts to come alongside and provide that necessary addition that I need to minister well. I don't get insight from them. I don't get input from them. The gift isolation then causes me to be, I can be ministering my gift, but I'm missing out on perspective that I need from those other people. And so it can potentially become harmful. I can miss out on some really needed advice because I'm looking at it from a very myopic single point of view. And if I were getting the input from others that I ought to be getting, I could be much more effective. And this relates to, as Steve pointed out, our gift liabilities. When we talk about our gift liabilities being where we are ministering in the flesh, and Steve pointed out to us Romans 8, 9, and 12, and 1 Corinthians 13, talking about the importance of love as the glue that binds us together in the body. So we are ministering in the flesh using the gift that God has given us, but we don't realize the fact that even that gift has a liability of doing something negative or harmful when we are misusing it, because we're operating out of the flesh using the powerful gift that God has given us. And so we might, again, it's because we're not receiving the input from other people that we need. So our gift liabilities, as Steve pointed out, are played out when undiscerning team leaders, for example, in a leadership position, might be making critical personnel and strategy decisions without consulting or involving gifted discerners or wise counselors. They inevitably will make bad decisions because of that. I like to use one example of when Moses and Aaron were given the power, and Moses, had this rod that God had given him and as a symbol of God being with him. But when he comes up to the rock there at the waters of Marah, and he strikes the rock and he says, "Must we bring forth water for you?" And he's misusing his gift and not in the way that God intended for him to do it. There is another place of a gift liability where we can be using the gift, perhaps, even we think for the right purpose, but we're using it in the wrong way, and therefore it accomplishes the wrong purpose. It works against us. So that's kind of my perspective on those two ideas. And just remembering that our core belief says team styles and bodybuilding roles focus on body life rather than individual assessment. And by that, what we mean is we don't get a really clear picture of the person's gifts unless we are looking at it in the context of how they operate with other people in the body of Christ. And so that's why it helps us to discern how we fit in the body, and we don't simply evaluate their individual gifts or their individual strengths. So I'm going to pause right there then, and I'm not going to talk so much anymore. I just wanted to kind of set the scene for us from Steve's article, and maybe even give a few of you a chance to bring that up if you could and look at it and say, hey, let's open up the mics. And just right there that far, what do you think about that? What are you observing? What are some examples that you might have had? And ultimately, what we want to get to in this dialogue would be to talk about how do we coach people out of that? How do we coach people away from gift isolation? So I'm going to ask you to just speak right up, if you will, with any thoughts you've got about that. I see the wheels turning, guys.
So I think, like, for one of the things that I'm always wrestling with is gifts have historically, in our context, been seen in a very individualistic way. It's my gifts. I have this gift. I think that's actually just a projection of our individual bias as opposed to a body bias. And so, like, I think that when you think about the gifts in line with the team styles and the bodybuilding roles, that's a really powerful way of helping come back to a more fundamental teaching, which is the whole body life issue, which I think we need to be. I think we make an assumption that people get body life, and they actually don't, because they are coming at it from an independent bias instead of an interdependent bias. So when we do the Grip-Birkman with people and we talk about their gifts, they automatically go to individual. We bring the team styles and the bodybuilding roles in, but they're not really looking at it from that interdependent posture, which means we have to go back, I think, and really do some kind of work with people, particularly with teams, I think, as it relates to that kind of interconnectedness, talking through the passages that relate to all of that, and really helping them wrestle through that bias that actually is very unbiblical.
Yeah, Les, and in our Western society, we tend to be kind of individualistic anyway, don't we? And so we're already setting them up for that just with our culture.
You know, yeah, I agree with that. And this is a huge problem, I think, in Christendom. But it's interesting to me that Steve's examples were from missionaries or former missionaries. And I think that exposes a very big problem in our Western mentality about missions. They had no local accountability. They had no local body life. We isolate ourselves as missionaries sometimes, thinking that these new Mexican or Bolivian or French converts to Christ, they don't have anything to offer them. And so we don't live out body life with the people that we're ministering to and with. And I think that's a huge shift in our mind that has to take place, that they join our team, that they are part of us. And I know that being a missionary, I know that there are differences and leaders need different people from different environments. I'm not arguing that, but it just shows this huge hole in how we live out body life and model it and receive it from those that we're ministering to.
Yeah. Jay, I came to the conclusion a few years ago, well, a few to me, I guess to my grandchildren, it would have been 2 lifetimes ago, but that we had been guilty of not giving the whole gospel to the people that we were trying to evangelize and disciple, because we were not getting to Matthew 28 with them. We were not giving them the Great Commission. We thought we had the Great Commission and we needed to be taking the gospel to them, but we didn't think in terms of that they also had the same commandment given to them, that they should go and make disciples of all nations, the same as we had that mandate, that we weren't giving them the Great Commission. And that was a huge mistake that we were making missiologically by thinking that it was all up to us. And that, even though we may have been thinking about our group, our team, our organization, our denomination even, but that still is kind of an example of gift isolation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think, you make me think that the concept of vulnerability comes up here. I've worked on the mission, like most of you, worked on the mission field, but also led a congregation here in the States. And that's always a challenge for leadership. In what environments can I be vulnerable, and who can I be vulnerable with? And I'm tending to think that those doubts are really inside of us and shouldn't exist. If we're part of a body, we lead by being vulnerable. And so I think that's another implication here, is that this gift isolation is not only isolating ourselves and our gifts, but it's a lack of true vulnerability and leadership, I think.
Wow, yeah.
I think there's an element too, where if you've been hurt once through that vulnerability, that makes you, twice shy to be vulnerable. And, we always have to encourage ourselves to be vulnerable and let God take care of the rest. And so gift isolation, I think part of it comes from the hurt of the past.
Talk to us a little bit more about that, Donna, not necessarily from a personal experience with hurt, but how that plays out a little bit more.
I actually will give you an example, because it was a close friend of mine who was a children's pastor, and her husband left her, and the church really did not come around her. And she does have amazing abilities with kids. And she had been such a great support to that whole church. And yet when something happened to her,
Mhm.
she didn't get any support back. So in the future, which of course now is the past, as I look at it, I go, it's so hard for her to use those giftings with kids that truly was a gift from God, in children's ministry, because she looks at it and goes, yeah, but when I fall apart, the church wasn't there. So I'm not going to use those gifts in the church because the church wasn't there for me either. So it wasn't necessarily her being as vulnerable as in the sense of kind of sticking herself out there, but there wasn't the support from the community, from the church community.
Wow. Thanks for
And
sharing.
from my perspective, it's such a huge loss for the church because I see her giftings and go like, I'd love to have her in any one of our churches.
I really appreciate that insight, Donna, because it's not just us being vulnerable. We have to create environments where it invites vulnerability and where vulnerability is welcomed and not shut down because we don't measure up. Appreciate that insight.
Yeah, and encouraging people when they've fallen in, like I said, in this case, her husband left her, but regardless what the falling is, are we walking alongside that person and going, okay, I realize you've been hurt. How can we still use this gift for the glory of God?
Yeah.
Communities.
I can talk a little bit from mission. One of the reasons why we're back is because the gifts that I have been given, I couldn't use and was not supported by my teammates. In fact, I was told to step down from my role and not minister to anyone. And so it really started to question, because I've done the Grip-Birkman, and that really helped me to understand truthfully who I was and how I could work together with the team. Being told to not serve on the team really made me question who God is and how he made me, and did I get it wrong? And so for a while, it makes you not move forward in your ministry. It helps you to question in a bad way. Is this really who I am? And I do come from more of an individualistic team setting, just because of the people that I work with. They're more team, more task oriented. And so sometimes it just makes you really question who you are and should I move forward and what is my next role? Like, how can I use these gifts in a team setting? And so it really kind of stops your ministry for a while.
Hey, Debbie, thank you for being vulnerable with us right now and sharing that. I just wonder, would you mind if, I hate to put you on the spot, but I know you and have been with you in a few trainings together. So let me just ask, would you mind if we pursued that just a little bit and allowed some of the group to ask some coaching kinds of questions using you as our fishbowl kind of example? Would that be all right?
Sure.
If not, feel free to say no if you don't want it.
No, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. So this is totally unrehearsed, guys, and spontaneous, but that's part of my personality as well. But I see a need here, and this is one of the things that we would be approaching with someone, just like what Steve was talking about in the article, someone who was not being allowed to exercise their gifts in ministry, and how should we approach that? We could talk about some ways that your leaders might have approached that differently with you, but since we don't have them here present for that, let's talk about how we might coach a person who, like you, is feeling or was feeling that your gifts were not being put to maximum use, was not allowing you to really minister out of your giftedness. And so guys, what I'd like to ask you all to do is think of some coaching kinds of questions that you would ask Debbie right now in the situation that she has described to us. What kinds of questions would you ask Debbie as a coach to help her move from where she might be right now to where she feels like she needs to be?
Debbie, this is Shannon, and I'm truly sorry you've had to create distance in order to get into a healthier place to do your ministry. But I would ask you if you can think back, what was an arena or a platform that you'd had in the past where you felt like you were truly using your gifts well?
Let me think. So I guess it's when we were back on furlough when I got introduced to Grip-Birkman from Doug, and he walked me through, and then I was in a role, it was a career guidance role, where I could use the assessments that was given to me to help lead and guide people to understand more of who they are and their giftings. And I had a very supportive boss manager who after I found out what I had learned about myself in the Grip-Birkman, I actually took it to him and I said, okay, look, this will make me serve in a better capacity of who I am. And I gave him my needs and I gave him my stresses and just the support from him and him sitting down with me and going, okay, so I will help you find a job where you can have this balance in your life of both ministering to people and doing admin stuff. And so I think that was the opportunity that I had where I served fully in the giftings that I had.
Thanks. That helps me understand a lot better. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I will add that the people that are surrounding me now over here on this side of the world are really helping me to process things and become healthy again. So it's not this side of the world, it's the other side of the world. I'll just say that.
One question that I would have asked, and you just answered it, but just to point out that would be another question would be, who do you have around you right now? Who could you reach out to that could help you as you process this, to not be trying to make your own decisions in isolation now just because you were forced into that particular circumstance, but to, as you were making your own decisions, do the healthy thing of gathering counselors around you and talking through it, letting them perhaps even, this is not a commercial for Grip, but with our new, we are rolling out now the Here's What I Think of You online, and to get a few of them to go do that. Here's what I think of you assessment for you, and come back and let's talk about it. Don't just receive their answers at face value, but get those answers from them and say, hey, maybe even an idea might be, could you get a couple or three of them together to talk through that with you to see what they see in you and what strengths they see in you? Would you have some folks like that you could call on? And it sounds like you're already doing something like that.
Yeah, luckily, the team that I'm on now, they encourage me in many ways. And I have, there's a new person that has gone to the Grip-Birkman training sometime this year. I don't remember exactly when. And she has a really good way of what is new that we could do with the Grip-Birkman, using it in our organization. And we've come up with an idea of allowing 3 to 4 people to get together to use our Grip-Birkman to help encourage each other and talk it through. Where do you see the gifts, and how do you see it in your lives? So that has truthfully helped me to go back, okay, I am on a very healthy team now, and they support the Grip-Birkman. In fact, we're trying to really pursue what we can do with inside our organization using the Grip-Birkman. So that has really thoroughly encouraged me.
Yeah. So here's an example from what I hear you saying of moving from that unhealthy situation where perhaps your gifts were not being used, and maybe the decisions that were being made were not being made as body or team,
Right.
looking at everyone's gifts, but you've moved from that to a healthier situation now where you are in a team that's doing that.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just our different cultures that come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And so the managers that I used to have overseas, they might have thought that they're doing everything correct for their culture.
Mm.
And so we do have to bring the culture into just whom we serve with that team aspect. Where over here I'm with Americans. So
I wonder if anyone else would have any other questions or coaching or comments even about things you've observed there that you'd like to bring to the group or to Debbie personally.
I don't know if this, it comes to my mind, the dilemma of this is that so often when we're coaching a group or coaching someone within a team, we are asking them to figure this out within the context of where God has placed them. And unless you have an ongoing relationship with that team or that group or that organization, we wouldn't necessarily know how healthy or unhealthy it is. And I'm just recognizing, I mean, I've worked with some teams and people have, soon after we did great team building times, they've exited because it just didn't work out in that setting. But honestly, it seemed like there were things that need to be adjusted, but not that the whole team was unhealthy when I was there. I was just not aware of how unhealthy it was at the time. And so for me as a coach coming in, I was really pushing towards this thing together, and we don't want to isolate. However, just as Debbie's mentioned to us, sometimes that particular context is not the place where we're going to be allowed to flourish. And in that sort of situation, then to be aware that that could happen, I guess, and then also to say, are there times when we need to at least in evaluation and encouragement, isolate out of that and say, okay, that is not the total of who you are, though. However, here is how God has created you. Let's pull that out and encourage that so that we're not just pushing it back into an environment that is squelching all of that. That's hard, at least for me, as I think of those teams that I've coached from the outside coming in, not knowing them well or for a long time. I wouldn't even know some of that might be going on under the surface just a little bit there.
I see thoughtful minds cogitating on what Matthew just shared with us, something really deep and important there. Someone have some thoughts about that? Some more thoughts about that? One thought that comes to my mind, Matthew, related to that is in a leadership position, I have found myself before working with someone that really was not a good fit. It was not, they were in a job that was not a good match for them. They were not working well in the team for whatever reasons. And when I would have to come and have that very difficult conversation with them, I could have simply said, you're fired, you're out of here. But I would have preferred to take, and I did prefer to take the tack of saying, look, can you see what I'm seeing, that this doesn't seem to be working out? And obviously I would have gone through the things of, first of all, trying to help them make corrections in their behavior if that was necessary. And, you know, what are the things that we can do from leadership to try and help you to succeed and flourish here? But after we'd been through all of that, and if I had to issue a second warning, for example, to say, can you see if this is not working? It seems to me that it must be because we just don't have a good fit here. How can we help you to find the place that you need to be so you can flourish? And my motive may have been questioned by some people, but I think my motive was always pure in wanting to say to them, I really do want to see you flourish, and I don't see you flourishing here. So what can we do to help you get to a place where you can flourish, where you can succeed, and your gifts can be better exercised to build the body with another group, with another team, perhaps in another place, under other circumstances, whatever, something else needs to change here. And doing that, not in isolation of just me making that decision, but always I would have other people involved in that decision with me. I would never have wanted to make that decision alone, but that's part of who I am, out of my personality also, of having a pretty high desire to want to involve other people in team decisions as much as I could. So I don't know, Matt, if that relates to what you're saying, but it seems to me that that's along those same lines of how do we work together to help everyone flourish in that. And like you say, just coming in for one team build, you might miss some of those kind of team dynamics that are going on. Yeah. I think about one team that I was working with early on. We did a full 3-day team build with them in a retreat setting, and we got into some really deep stuff. We're going to get into really deep stuff. And about the first break, the very first break that we took, the pastor leader came up to me and he said, man, this is great stuff. I already know the 2 people I need to fire on my team. And I was like, whoa. And it's, I spent every other break trying to work with him. I mean, I almost had to just ignore the other people on break time to try and coach him through, wait a minute, what can you do as leader to mentor these people, to help them find their place, to help them along? I mean, this was not what we wanted to do. But sure enough, within 6 months, he had fired 2 of them. And then within about 4 or 5 more months from that, he was gone. So that was not my most successful team build by any means. Any other thoughts come to you from anything else that we've sparked along here?
The word that comes to the forefront for me is the word environment. Mm. And the idea that leaders and teams create an environment that is either conducive to body life and interdependence, or that is conducive to independence. And when we come into a situation as a kind of an external coach, if that's the way it's working, it's really important for us to try and do a little bit of an environmental scan to the best that we can. But I think it also is helpful for us to recognize the limitations that exist for us, and that we're not ultimately the one that's responsible for that team. We're not the ones that have contributed to where it is right now. And so there needs to be a sense of, I think there's that environmental scan, there's recognizing that we're partnering with something that was existing before us and will be existing after we leave. And so there's a lot of discernment necessary, but I think there's also a need to be realistic about our expectations in terms of that moment in time versus the journey that team happens to be on. And we want to do something that is effective and helpful, and that should always be our goal. And the other thing that comes to mind in this for me is just the importance of the leader setting the tone for that environment. And I think there is value in working with the leader. And like even when I did a team build recently and I sat down for a while with the leader before, just kind of working through how are you doing, where are you going, what are your expectations, what are you hoping for, what are all of those kinds of things, doing the best I could to try and figure out where they were at. And I think we ended up, that was helpful. So I think there's the environmental piece. I think there's understanding kind of who we are in their bigger process. And then I think there's just that sense of really trusting God for discernment to know how to be helpful in that moment for that team.
Yeah. Hey, Les, thinking about that also, let's transition from that to the concept of need, because need is an important factor in what you're describing there, I think, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we help them to recognize that need is not synonymous with needy, but that we are part of a body all joined together and we really do need each other?
For me, like, that's always one of the most interesting and I think rich elements of a team build, is the opportunity to not only speak to that, but to get them to work at discovering that and being okay with that. But again, it's like you made the comment, Larry, and I think it's absolutely right. Like, we talk about the cultural bias towards independence. I think we have to also talk about the cultural bias against showing ourselves as needing something or somebody.
Yeah.
Because that individualistic mindset creates in us that independence that then showing need is not consistent with that. So it's quite an interesting muck that we find ourselves in based on how much culture is rubbed off on us. But when you start to see a team develop that sense of, oh yeah, like this is what I bring, but this is what I need, and you bring that, and it's like all of a sudden it's like fireworks going off.
Yeah.
And it's just rich.
Have any of you ever worked with a pastor who felt like he had to have all the gifts? And it was apparent by the way he answered his questionnaire on the grip. Anybody ever worked with someone like that? Speak up, please.
I worked with somebody who wasn't a pastor, but was overseas as a missionary. And she said that she had all the gifts, and in greater or lesser extent, but that she had all the gifts, and it was difficult to coach her from that position. So it was very, very interesting.
How did you end up coaching her, Lee?
Not well. And no, really, genuinely, I didn't know what else to say other than, yeah, I'll talk to her husband, these sorts of things. But in the end, there was not much coaching that actually happened. And it was more along the lines of just simply, just plowing forward and letting her have, to believe what she wanted to believe, and then hoping that something that we did stuck. But there was no amount of dissuading her from that position.
Lee, I'm not sure the situation you were in, but I found that there's a huge difference between those where, the organization or leadership has come down and said, we're all going to be doing Grip-Birkman, versus those who were like, oh, that would be really interesting. I'd like to do that. And it's so much easier, obviously, to coach the latter. And I feel like the former, it's almost a waste in some cases because, as you experience, it's sort of like you don't coach them well, but part of it is they're not receptive either.
Yeah, that's a good point, Donna. When they're doing this because someone has told them they have to, we have to also be careful how they are answering the questions. Are they answering the questions in such a way as they think their leadership wants them to answer it, or thinks they ought to, or the profile they think they're supposed to be filling right now because of the position they're in, that sort of thing. So we do have to kind of watch with that when we have someone in that situation where they might be a little bit passive resistant in the very beginning when they're first introduced to it. And we don't have 100%. We're not batting 1,000 here. Not absolutely everybody is just thrilled and excited with the reports that they get from Grip-Birkman. Just about everybody, but not everybody.
But I think, so this is an interesting thing because it goes back to something you said right at the beginning about the assessments are not the whole package.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the thing that we have to remember that the Grip-Birkman is a tool we use as a coach to engage with an individual for their development and discovery. And so it's not just the tool that's on the table, it's our presence and our coaching capacity. It's us being curious, it's us being invested in them. It's all of those things. And so I think a lot of times, like that comment that Donna made about the kind of organizational resistance, the tool will not break that down. A good coach will.
Yeah.
And a person finds themselves in a coaching conversation that's meaningful, and that there's discovery and all of those kinds of things. And then at that point, you begin to break down those barriers. But it's the coaching conversations that are actually going to break that down, because they're so central to people's engagement with the instruments.
Very good point, Les. I think you're what we call your tocayo, who has the same name as you, Les, cool over there. I think I saw your mic open a while ago that you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I actually scrolled back through the chat back to what Lee wrote earlier.
Yeah.
There was a phrase in there that kind of struck me, the productivity metric. And I was wondering if we get stuck in that mindset and my scores on my metric are high enough, then I probably don't have needs, right?
Oh.
And what happens to the leader or the team member who is stuck in that place? Have they lost their ability to be part of a functioning team then? And then the rest of our conversation we've just had plays into that.
Yeah. I'll share another screen with you, because see if this is talking about what you're getting at there too, Les, with God designed us with strengths and weaknesses. This is core for us, that every person has to play a role in strengthening, building, and expanding the body of Christ. Our weaknesses create need areas where we build each other up. And so if we don't acknowledge those need areas, then we are also weakening the sense of unity in the body. Is that not right?
That makes sense.
And we're doing a disservice to the body. If one person thinks all of the gifts are embodied in one person, then why do we even need the body of Christ? We don't. But the truth of the matter is, we all know that we do, right? Jay Jarbo, I see your head really going up and down, and your mic was open a while ago too.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think, I think Les is right. We can't rely totally on the instrument. That's just a tool to have good, helpful conversations. That we have to be curious and maybe even direct in some ways. So this is what I'm curious, because you said you had all the gifts. So what is the value of the body? How does that jive with 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Ephesians chapter 4? You're not being confrontational, but you are being more direct, and at least inviting them to deal with that conflict that you sense, that you see. And I just think that's huge. And I love that principle about need and expectations. That sometimes is a better word, although I keep pressing the need, because that's part of humility, I think. If you can't be humble enough to say there's something I'm lacking here and I need from somebody else, then there's real barriers to body life. But just the logic of, if I say I don't have a need that has to be provided by somebody else, that this is just a growth area, this is just showing me a growth area. So if I put enough time and energy into that growth area, then the logical conclusion of that is, I don't need the body. I can eventually, give me enough time and I put enough energy into it, I can be totally self-sufficient. That's what that's basically saying. And that's where some people want to be. And that's where our culture calls us to be. And so that's why I think kingdom is so countercultural. We need one another. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent point. Someone else have a thought related to that?
Larry, in an ideal situation, like when doing a team build, we always want to do pre-coaching, helping a person walk through their instrument, learn the vocabulary, see some things about themselves. But I've also seen the benefit of, once the team build's over, doing a post-event individual coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the exercises I've had people do in the past is, along spiritual gifts, is one of the last exercises of the team build is think through everyone's spiritual gifts, think about the list of spiritual gifts, and just write down people's names based on what you see as their spiritual gift. What are evidence of those? And be ready to say exactly how you've seen it exhibited. And then collect that. And then in part of the post-coaching is to say, well, these are the things that people you work with and serve alongside are seeing in you. These are ways that they've affirmed you using this gift. And even for the person who thinks they have them all, or the person who thinks they don't have any, having some people acknowledge it and give an example of how that gift was used well, or they got a chance to witness it, gave the person something really tangible to hold on to. And I was thinking about it, something I haven't done is maybe take time to come back to people, like maybe two or three weeks later, to say, now that you've had time to reflect on this, pray about it, mull it over, search God's heart. Now, what are you saying? What are you seeing and thinking about how you fit with this body or this group? And I'm just realizing that's where you giving God time to work on the person's heart would be helpful. And I've missed that opportunity. I don't know if I've intentionally set in that go home and reflect on it period for people. And that's a good lesson learned from this time together.
You know, as we've moved, we've evolved some of the language that we use with your leadership grip. And as you know, we have even moved more and more away from even using so much of the word leadership, because of the connotation that has of building the strong leader. And, you know, you need to be the leader. And what role of leadership are you playing? And at one point we even had, you know, it was primary functions of leadership at one point that we had in what we now call body life roles. It went through a couple of other iterations before we finally settled on body life role, but or bodybuilding roles, your bodybuilding roles. But as we have moved away from that concept, because even thinking with our Western thinking of leadership as being embodied in a person, and not thinking of it in terms of what is the relationship of the body for that. And I'll share another quick screen with you to kind of where I am thinking with this, coming out of this, that God designed us with both strengths and weaknesses. This is another core belief for us. So we have both strengths and weaknesses, and therefore we ask these three questions. Where are you powerful? How are you weak? And therefore, who do you need? Those three questions that focus on what we're talking about right here. Because our Western mindset usually says, my strength is, and if we were to say, but I'm weak in the area of, then our Western mindset would be, therefore I need to grow in this area. And that implies that we're trying to get all the gifts and all the strengths in one leader. Instead, if we change that from what do I need to do to build up in this area of weakness, change that question to who do I need to complement my strengths because they already have strengths in this area. Wow, doesn't that change the dynamic of the discussion? Thoughts on that?
I think sometimes in certain settings, we try and hire in whatever's the weak link. You know, if I'm not good at this, then I'll hire it in. I think we can also, and I like your point about the language changing. And I think that we have to be always careful that the language we're using doesn't, again, create too much focus on the individual, even as we're talking about their gifts, but it really is God working through them to bless others. How's that happening? How's God doing that? But I was thinking as well that sometimes we can still come to a place where, even in the way we phrase those questions, it's who do you need? Who do I need? Rather than looking at what do we need, because it's not just me, and then you need to complement or somehow fill out my weaknesses, but rather we are together as a team, so we're each bringing a piece to that, piece of the pie, piece of the puzzle, whatever, so that it's not just my needs, but I bring this. What else do we need as a group, rather than looking at um, only mine. I think there's value in saying, okay, I'm weak in certain areas, but I'm not just using you so that I'm a complete person or I'm a complete set, but actually we are together in this. And so even sometimes the way we phrase those kind of questions, it isn't like I've got most of it, but I need you over there, and then I'm good to go. But I bring a piece, and we all bring a piece. And so, what do we need that I don't? But I do bring something.
Yeah, Matt, I think you've brought up a very important point there, very important point, because even when we are coaching through that person, so who do you need? If on an individual basis, if we're only coaching that individual, so who do you need? And we don't take it to the team level of looking at the strengths of the team and who do we need both as individuals on the team, but as a group, where are our blind sides, perhaps? Because a lot of times teams are built with just getting people who are like-minded. I want to get people like me on this team, people who think like I do. And boy, that can create some huge blind spots, can't it? And so if we don't get to the level of coaching the team to say, hey, where are those blind spots for us? And who do we need? Do we need to outsource things? Or sometimes do we have some complementary strengths on the group that are not being realized? Someone who has a hidden gift that's not being exercised, and we haven't helped them to maximize that and bring it to the surface, right? Let me take this opportunity to say, Debbie, thank you very, very much for allowing us to use you as a fishbowl coaching session there with you to talk about that situation. Thank you so much for sharing that vulnerability with us.
Sure.
That's one of the tremendous values that we have. I hope that all of you, whenever you're doing team builds, have carried this out to try and transmit to those teams the need for affirmations, how important that is, that we affirm one another. And thank you as we do that, even with this group, when we are appreciating, obviously with our comments and follow-up comments from what other people are saying, that we're showing our appreciation and affirmation for each other in these dialogues. So anything else that comes to mind before we sign off, guys? Don't want to keep anyone from having the opportunity to speak up or that. By the way, there were some things I noticed in the chat and I was not following closely, but I could see that you guys were answering each other. You know that you can save the chat yourself. Those of us that are here on the live call, those of you that are not, you missed out some gems by not being with us live. We don't save the chats for you, but there are some other things going on there. Be sure and keep up with that. And by the way, there are some neat things. I did mention that Here's What I Think of You is live now on the assessment. Coaches are getting those reports from the individuals, and we're still, hey, be patient with us. There are some bugs that we're still working out on it. But I strongly encourage you to go and do that. You, right now as a coach, could go and do your own Here's What I Think of You, put the addresses in for some people to do that for you, so you can see how those reports are coming back, and get some of your clients perhaps to do that as well, some of your family members to do that, so you can see how you're receiving those reports as a coach for those people that are in your database. And if they are not in your database, then get in touch with Anna Dawn at support@Grip-Birkman.com, and she will help you to get those people, if they've already done the assessment and you want them to get into your database as a coach with their GRIP reports to be in your database, you can get Anna Dawn to help you with that. So folks, feel free to call on any of us at any time. It's been a real thrill to be with you today in this dialogue. Big thanks to Steve Hoke for stimulating our discussion. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to talk about that. And next month, we'll be following up some more and trying to apply how our Grip-Birkman values and principles apply to those things that we're using, perhaps to help us to be even better coaches so that we can continue to build unity in the body of Christ. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Larry. Bye-bye.